Hello, everyone. My name is Julian Zamora, and I'm the Adult Literacy Coordinator with LA County Library. And I welcome you to tonight's event, Citizenship Panel Discussion, Land Acknowledgement. The County of Los Angeles recognizes that we occupy land and still originally and still inhabited and cared for by the Tongva, Tataviam, Serrano, Quiche, and Chumash peoples. We honor and pay respect to their elders and descendants, past, present, and emerging, as they continue their stewardship of these lands and waters. We acknowledge that settler colonization resulted in land seizure, disease, subjugation, slavery, relocation, broken promises, genocide, and multi-generational trauma. This acknowledgement demonstrates our responsibility and commitment to truth, healing, and reconciliation, and to elevating the stories, culture, and community of the original inhabitants of Los Angeles County. We are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on these ancestral lands. We are dedicated to growing and sustaining relationships with Native peoples and local tribal governments, including, in no particular order, Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Tonga Indians of California Tribal Council, Gabrielino Tonga San Gabriel Band of Mission Indians, Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians Quiche Nation, San Manuel Band of Mission Indians, San Fernando Band of Mission Indians. To learn more about the First Peoples of Los Angeles County, please visit the Los Angeles City County Native American Indian Commission website at lanaic.lacounty.gov. So welcome again to tonight's event, Citizenship Panel Discussion. LA County is proud to host a panel discussion featuring successful naturalized Americans who will share their unique journeys, embark on a journey of empowerment, identity, and community on the path to U.S. citizenship. Tonight's moderator is Daniel Hernandez. He is a Chicano Resource Librarian at the Chicano Resource Center located at the East Los Angeles Library, part of LA County Library. He has been with LA County Library for over 20 years and hosts relevant cultural and educational programs throughout the year. The Chicano Resource Center was established in 1976 to serve the cultural and informational needs of LA County's large Latinx and Chicanx community. The center offers a large core collection of materials on Latinx history, literature, and art. For more information about the Chicano Resource Center, visit lacountylibrary.org/East Los Angeles Library. Please welcome Daniel Hernandez.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to LA County Library's celebration of Citizenship Day. September 17th is Constitution and Citizenship Day. On this date in 1787, the U.S. Constitution was signed, and in 1952, President Truman signed the law proclaiming this date as Citizenship Day. For some time now, LA County Library has been offering award-winning resources and programs to help immigrants and those seeking information on citizenship. So it is with great pleasure that we honor this day with an event that explores the lives of people who have taken the immigration and citizenship journey. Immigration and becoming a citizen is one of the most important and life-changing experiences a person can have. Each immigrant's challenges and experiences are unique. Today, we have brought together a panel of 3 people from different walks of life to hear their stories and learn from their experiences. Our conversation will be informal, but we hope that our talk today will give you new insight into what it's like to leave everything you know and thrive in a new country and culture. So let me introduce the panelists. We have a very exciting tablet for us today. First, we have LA County Library's own Binh Lee. Binh Lee is currently the Assistant Director and CIO of LA County Library, directing IT initiatives and innovations for 86 community libraries across the county. For the last 25 years, Binh has delivered technology that connected communities to library programs and services while improving the customer experiences. Through E-Rate, he completed the Gigabyte Libraries project, where he was able to upgrade the library's infrastructure with new circuits delivering gigabyte bandwidth to all LA County libraries. Binh is actively supported LA County's Digital Divide and Delete the Divide initiatives. He is a technology thought leader who is passionate about transforming libraries into community resiliency centers and to support the underserved and underconnected communities. We're also very proud to have Claudia Maldonado. Claudia Maldonado is an early childhood educator with 20 plus years in experience in early childhood and early learning practices. She has worked with federal and state-funded early learning programs and the Family Child Care Network system in Southern California. Claudia was a classroom teacher and was promoted to specialist, then to an administrator in the early learning field. She is currently working as an independent consultant. Also, she has written her first book, Mama Works Very Hard, and the Spanish version, Mama Trabaja Muchísimo. Currently, she is working on her second and third children's books. Claudia is a strong believer in the power of storytelling, the importance of play, and the appropriate early learning practices for young children. We're also very pleased to have the artist Jose Antonio Aguirre. Jose Antonio was born in Mexico City. He obtained his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Art Institute of Chicago and a Master of Fine Arts at California Institute of the Arts. He is recognized for his Byzantine and Venetian glass mosaic murals. He has mounted over 14 solo exhibitions and has participated in over 130 collective exhibitions, both nationally and internationally. He has produced over 35 permanent works of public art, including the piece Our Legacy Forever Presente, which is the welcoming mural at LA County Library's East Los Angeles branch. He has been a teacher and artist in residence at Universidad Autónoma Metropolitana Azcapotzalco in Mexico City, the Armory Center for the Arts in Pasadena, Azusa Pacific University, and the Arts in Corrections program for the state of California. Currently, he is the executive director of the Mexican Cultural Institute of Los Angeles and continues to work actively as an artist, lecturer, and educator. So I welcome all of you. Thank you for coming. I suppose we'd hear applause if we weren't on Zoom.
Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
You're welcome. I kind of want to just go through your lives and your experiences. And so I would like to kind of start with what you remember from before you came to the United States. So let's start with Claudia. Claudia, where are you from? Tell us about your family and what you remember.
Yes, yes. Well, happy Tuesday to everyone. Thank you for this invitation of being part of this panel. I'm honored to say my story. I came when I was 9 years old from El Salvador. And I arrived here in Los Angeles, California. And since then, I've been part of a residence from here. So yes, I'm originally born in El Salvador.
Thank you for that. I didn't know that you were from El Salvador. That's so great.
Thank you.
Jose Antonio, how about you?
Well, in my case, Daniel, again, I'm very thankful to be here. It's an honor to share my experience in the United States. I actually come from an area that is Los Altos de Jalisco, a town called Teocaltiche, although I was born and raised in Mexico City. And it's been several years since I came here. If we get into the history, it was practically as how you say, following a adventure. I just wanted to visit the United States. I ended up going for a 2-week vacation in Chicago. My goal at that time was to buy an electric guitar and be able to see one of those huge rock and roll concerts, and maybe have fell in love with an American blue-eyed girl.
That's great.
So that was my beginning to come to the United States.
Okay. We'll explore that a little bit more in a little bit too. Binh, how about you? What can you tell us?
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Daniel. Glad to be part of the panel. I was born in 1971, Pearl Harbor Day, in Saigon, Vietnam, also known as Ho Chi Minh City today. During, interesting times in Vietnam, right? When the Vietnam War was happening. when the Vietnam War, when the communists came down and took over South Vietnam, that's when, what, 75? And also when 75, it's when the last US troop left Vietnam. And that's when our family decided to pretty much escape the oppression that was happening during that time and join pretty much millions of people to get on boats and try to get away. And we're part of they call boat people that were able to survive the experience, and was able to get to a refugee camp and then ended up in the United States in 1980. And we kept all family together. So there's 6 siblings, 3 older brothers, 2 younger sisters, and my parents. And we're one of the successful stories that made it through to, a true American story where we are today, living a, successful life in the States. So happy to dive deeper today as we go along.
Well, let's dive a little deeper. Can you remember any of your feelings before you came? Or I know you were young.
Yeah, I was young, 71 when the war ended. It was 75. So I was like almost 5 years old when we're about to, my parents started planning their escape, basically, with many, many other Southern Vietnamese friends and family who had the same idea of how do we escape the communism that's coming down. There were a lot of people that were in re-educational camps, and my brothers were of age so that they were doing so. We were well off as a family. When they came down, the armies and everything took over our houses. Obviously, they changed the currency, so we really didn't have anything else to own. So my parents at that time, and a lot of times I'm telling my story through stories of also my parents and my aunts and uncles that shared to me. So I was just too young to remember a lot of it. But it was hard times, right? So everyone, I just can't imagine the decision that they made. The decision, a lot of times, the families, because there's stories during the 75 up to 1980, stories of just families disappearing in the tidal waves when they're trying to leave on boats that capsize that you don't hear ever again. So families were strategizing, well, 3 of us would go, another 3 would go after. But my parents decided, if we're gonna leave this world, we're gonna leave together. And we snuck out like at 2 a.m., got on a boat, pray, went through hard times, hunger, pirates, you name it, for weeks at a time in the open waters, and ran into a couple ports that didn't want us, took us back out, and we landed in at the end point was Indonesia, where we decided to capsize. We were able to get to land, capsized our boat on purpose, where they couldn't tug us back out. So we just took refuge on the beach, and eventually the government had to come in and take us to a refugee camp, and really started the process of immigration, paperwork, and started to find a new home for us. And then from there, it took a while, almost a year and a half, living in just bunk beds within a huge camp bunking, 8 of us together, and just waited for opportunities to go. Opportunities come. We had opportunity to go to Australia, Canada, but we had to split up the family if we did that, right? So there's sponsorships that would take only one of us or two of us. But we wanted to stick together, so that's why it took longer. And then we had a Mormon family in Utah, Daniel, that took all of us, all 8 of us. So we flew into Utah, and that's when I, took a step into the snow in Salt Lake City, and we stayed in with our sponsor for like a year doing sign language because we didn't understand English, but and then went on from there to be educated in Utah for a number of years. Got into an ESL. Really went to the library for my ESL education, and then which comes full circle right now, right, Daniel? I'm running the largest library system in LA County, just paying forward, paying back, and understanding the need to support immigration, to support the underserved, and it gives me purpose today to do all that. So we can go in more, but
yeah. Well,
I'll hand it back to you for.
I'm curious that I know it must be hard to remember. How old were you again?
I was 5. I was 5
years old. So when I think of what I can remember when I was 5, it's almost nothing. But do you remember, I don't know, feeling what are the parents talking about, or did you feel like can you remember if you like understood or if it was just happening? Or?
It was just happening. Like, I have imagery of it when I was on the boat. And I don't know if it's my mind through all the stories on how it was. You're talking about a fishing boat that can only hold 100 people, and there's 200 people on there, right? Crammed up. So it's just a family. This is the space where our knees are to our chest and our families are hovering. We were rationing food because we don't know how long we're going to be out there, food and water. And there, honestly, there's people that didn't make it because of starvation and just being out in the weather, and we just had to fight, and it's a story of survival, and we're just one of the fortunate ones. I think history has, as far as statistics, we're talking about 200, 300,000 people that didn't make it, and we were one family that did. And there's a whole documentary on the boat people that with stories, hundreds of thousands of stories like mine. So I'm definitely not unique.
Claudia, what do you remember? How do you?
Yes, I'm listening to you, Binh, and my story is very similar. I was older, so I remember every single step of the way of moving from one nation to the next for survival because we chose to live. My brother was assassinated. I was 9 years old in El Salvador. So at that point, in 1982, you couldn't distinguish who was the bad guy or the good guy. They both side rape women, both side recruited children.
Right.
So I don't say, oh, this is the bad or this is the good. Who knows who's assassinated my brother? He was just waiting for the bus to get home. So yes, I do remember my mom after the 9 days of burying my brother said something very similar to you, Binh. We all live together. We will departure the country together. And many neighbors, I remember, told my mom, you can leave the teenagers with me. I'll take care of them. And she said, no, we will all go together and travel and do this journey together. And that's what she did by herself. She sold her house. She sold every single thing that you can imagine, plate. We came with 2 dresses or 2 outfits, a pair of shoes, and that's it. And she sold every single thing and just came to America. And the journey was long, but it was very successful. And as Binh said, there's other families that had it worse, but for some reason, I do recall that we had arrived to the bus. So we were already inside the bus, and my oldest sister, which is Mama worked very hard. I dedicate the book to her, because she was the oldest, like my mom's right and left hand type of deal, because she was the oldest sibling. So she gave us a little stamp of a prayer, and she told us, okay, you know, the rest of the siblings, you pray this every second that you can, and we will be able to pass. So there you go, all the children praying every day, after meal, before a meal, before we jump into a different bus, and so on and so forth. I know we stopped in Mexico City, so that attached me to you, Jose. We went to Mexico City, to the Basilica, and we saw Virgin of Guadalupe, the real Virgin of Guadalupe for us. In El Salvador, we celebrate December 12th. It's a tradition. So yes, and we were able to cross the border. It was a challenge. It was hard. We didn't sleep many nights, but we had food. No one was hurt by anyone. Yes, we did find some individuals at certain countries that did not want to help us, but we also found people did want to help us. And we were a group of 11 people, including children, 9, 8, 7-year-old children, that we were part of that group. But yeah, and we were able to cross the border in San Diego, California, and arrived.
Mhm. And as a child, what were you, how did, when I was young, we just moved across the country. So I remember the feelings, they were, not knowing for sure, there was anxieties and things like that.
Of course.
Do you have memories of
Yes.
questioning or?
Questioning, not so much, because my mom was going through a loss, which was my brother. He was only 26 years old, very successful guy, and back in our country. So anxiety, I think I developed anxiety now that I'm a specialist in child development. I go back and I see, oh, so that was anxiety what I had, where I used to hear my mom praying, bringing all the saints from from heaven down to our house so they will come in and recruit the rest of us. So I do remember I stopped eating. I was so underweight. I was 9 years old, looking like a 5-year-old kid, because I constantly was worried. I didn't know of what. I knew that there was a bad guy, there was a good guy, but I didn't know the real meaning of why. Oh, because we can get killed tomorrow. Oh, okay, that's the reason why. So yeah, I developed anxiety back at home. And did I want to leave my friends, leave my house, leave my clothing? I love my dresses. I have to leave them all. Of course not. You don't want to move. And I remember a neighbor telling me, because my nickname is Cachita. Cachita, how come you don't want to go to the US, where there's white people and people with blonde hair and blue eyes? Why don't you want to go? And I said, well, because I don't know what's out there. I don't speak the language. I know they speak a different language than mine. I want to stay here with you, with my ball. And she started laughing like, oh, child, you don't know what you're saying. But yeah, so it was that detach of leaving everything behind, everything that you know, that your school. I used to go with nuns, and they were just so sweet. So yeah, that's what I remember very vividly, every single thing that we went through that journey.
And Jose Antonio, your story is a little bit different because you're still very involved with both countries and cultures. So tell us a little bit about yourself. And well, I know you came for a guitar and maybe a blonde girlfriend, but
Well, it was very interesting because growing up in Mexico City, as you know, one of the most cosmopolitan cities, one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, was very fascinating, in my youth. And I come from that generation that a Mexican writer, Carlos Monsiváis, baptized as the first generation of gringos being born in Mexico. And it took me a little time to understand that. But in reality, what it was is that, when I was a child, somehow Mexico was already trying to become the role model for the country was the United States. I mean, we are next, so they were looking into how to bring that kind of a middle class lifestyle into especially in the city, for certain sectors of the city. And because of that, I was always exposed to the United States culture, through music, through television, and also the fact that my family on both sides, with my mother, my grandfather had come to the United States, to California, when he was 12 years old. We're talking just at the turn of the century, 1900, 1902, 1903, something like that, because he was an orphan. They had a brother and a sister, and he had to provide for them. So somehow a family member brought him over to California, and they were building the railroad, and so he went to the guy who was in charge and says, we need to have a job for this young kid. He says, no, he's too young. This job is too hard. And says, well, he really needs to make some money to help his brother and sister because they are destitute. He says, well, the only thing I can think of is why we don't have him go up and down the rails, the area they're working with water. He will give him the water, So he stayed for that, eventually went back to Mexico, but then also came back to the United States. To make the story short, it was the roots of having some family here, uncles and aunts who were born from my mother's side here, although she did not, she was the youngest. So when they decided to go back somewhere around 1930, my mother was born in our hometown in Jalisco, in the Los Altos de Jalisco. And on my father's side was the same situation. My uncle, his older brother, ended up coming to Los Angeles and practically living here but through all his life, I will say that more than 50 years he spent here, So in my case, was this attraction to the United States, the stories of the family, this and that, and having a little peek. I remember visiting family in Matamoros and having an early peek to Brownsville, and somehow jump a little bit in there to buy a couple of records. So, that was part of the attraction, and as like I say, we were into music, American music. We were into the TV. It was the American programs, the Lone Ranger, the Untouchables, all these programs from the 60s were part of my growing up, to the point that when I was in high school, actually, I remember that for my girlfriend, I had to say mamacita, which would be the equivalent of baby, but I had to say in Spanish, mamacita, I love you. Because if I say yo te amo, that was it. We were out of the picture, So to me, the situation of coming to the United States was more of an adventure, It was not really escaping something. It was not really, trying to have a better life for my family or myself. On the contrary, it was one question of, when can I go there? I want to go. And like I mentioned, really, I ended up going to Chicago in the summer of 1976 for a literally 2-week vacations, And the goal, like I said, was to see a rock and roll concert, one of those big ones, and buy my guitar. And like I said, maybe have a blue blonde eye, in that sense. So a lot of things happened in the meantime, but that was the beginning, having that connection of somehow family who lived here and kind of that fascination about the United States to what we knew, in a city like Mexico City. Yeah.
Can I ask you, how old were you then?
When I arrived here,
Mm-hmm.
I was 20 years old. I was 20 years old, I had just finished. I was actually studying music. I had enrolled in the School of Music of the University of Mexico, and my goal at that moment was to be a composer. I had a rock and roll band. We were actually 9 members, I played trumpet and percussions, So we were one of those kind of like a Chicago, kind of a band, or so it was that part, that we really and we were fascinated. I'm telling you, I was listening to Janis Joplin, I was listening to Jefferson Airplane, Hendrix, of course the British wave, too, and at the same time, there were things happening there with the Mexican rock and roll, that it was called the Chicano wave, La Onda Chicana, which were groups actually who had moved from the inside the country to Tijuana. Tijuana was a magnet, for these musicians, and therefore, besides the blues and soul, they also have connected a lot with the we can call it the Chicano bands, like Malo, Tierra, and so that somehow they had this influence of obviously Santana too, so they will go back to Mexico City, and it created a big movement in music, and so we were really embracing the whole thing, and even the hippie movement, actually we were called hippitecas, Aztec hippies. So, we tried to and we had a fascination with a lot of the principles in terms of, we were against Vietnam War, somehow, although I was very young when all this was happening, because before that, we're talking when I was about 12 years old. Well, when I was 12, one of the main things that happened in my life was that I lived through the Mexican massacre of October the 2nd, el 2 de octubre, We lived just practically across the street in one of the high rises next to Plaza de las Tres Culturas. So, that gave me some, how you say, awareness about that something was going with the world that I didn't understand why, but I didn't like, So that I went in the other direction. And maybe also what helped me was that I was, well, my elementary school was in a Catholic school. We were learning English. I was, everybody had to learn English. So I went into this basic English language, classes practically I will say for about 10, 15 years of my life until I came to the United States, So that was the reality at that moment.
What was it? Hippitecas?
Hippitecas, Aztec hippies, hippie teca de Aztec teca.
I love that name.
Binh, now you're in Utah, right? And you've got a whole new life ahead of you. What do you remember about that?
Well, I mean, I saw a lot of white people. I was different for sure, right? Definitely, stand out in, the only Asian in my class. It was scary, cried a lot. Looked confused, just didn't understand culture, didn't understand where I'm at and why I have to show up to this place every day, and it's like Groundhog Day every day. Wake up, cry, went through it, had to sit through it, went to the library, try to learn the ABCs, and until for the very first year, really getting to adopt and adapt to the environment, and understood the language better and was able to interact. There's again, you as a kid, kids are mean, so you got some bullies, but then you have nice kids that kind of take you in and support you, and definitely got into fights because I'm different, and had enough of the bullying. I remember standing up to a bully and just say, okay, I'll meet you this place after school, and and I was ready to get my butt kicked. And he didn't show up because I stood up, and I showed up, and maybe he thinks I'm a relative of Bruce Lee or something that he doesn't want to mess with. I don't know. Who knows? But it's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But that went through elementary school, and at that time, a lot of the friends and family friends that were on the same boat ended up in Los Angeles. So I and the whole family, we moved to LA, practically, with nothing, just because we knew, it was a culture where, our people are here, lots of friends that can get that we can get help from, and really pool our resources and to start something. And that was the plan. And so we ended up here in '87 when I was in junior high, 7th grade at the time. And again, adapting to like, hey, I see my people. And it's just a different culture, again, having to adapt. And we're grew up in Highland Park, and just a totally different type of environment. And then finally was still in ESL all the way up to high school, and trying to learn the language, and figure things out. Again, got into a lot of trouble because we were in neighborhoods that were not great. We moved in with two other, we had a house, 3-bedroom, 1-bath, and 3 families were living together just so that we can afford the place and afford the rent. And eventually, we were able to save up. My parents working as a dishwasher, pizza man, you name it, 3 jobs, 4 jobs, just to be able to move out. And to us, we made it. We're going to do whatever we can. We're not going to give up, and it's a dream, and we're going to make the best of it. And they fought and did whatever they can to ensure that we get the education and didn't have to go out and beg and worked. And they suffer for the benefit of the 6 children. So just looking back, it's a amazing story and sacrifice. And at this age, when they're 80 something, I keep on asking, just more stories the better, so I can better understand how they made those decisions. It's just unfathomable that they can just say, we're gonna go, and it's better than what we have. And if we capsize, it's better than what we have. And it's just crazy to think. And but here we are because of those sacrifices. But we can talk about citizenship next, but I'll pass it back to you.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about citizenship. Now, I wanted to ask Claudia a similar question. Now you're here. When did you start to feel like I'm here, or what kind of experiences did you have that did it feel worse all of a
Yeah.
sudden, or
So I want to say my first 4 years, or our first 4 years, were tough in the US. Yeah. Because at this point we're on our own. And the housing, we couldn't afford housing. I remember the first year, in months, I went, kid you not, maybe 5 different elementaries. So I would start all over again in each school, because my mom was looking for affordable rent, or because we were kicked out because she couldn't collect the rent. So we end up in South Central Los Angeles, and that was another story to our book, another chapter to our book, because it was not safe. It was not safe, and we got robbed many, many times, especially my brother. He was the male, he was a teenager, so he would get robbed all the time. So we knew, okay, so after 6:30, we can't walk outside because it's dangerous. So with schooling, with finding a place to stay, we didn't have family in the States, so we just literally was just us, us as family. My mom, my dad had already arrived here maybe a year and a half before, but the head of household was my mom. The make decision was her. The brain, the decision maker was her, and he was, you know, he would help, but it wasn't anything stable, and I'll leave that to that. So yeah, in after I think I was already in the 6th grade, and another challenge I had is that I missed a lot of school because she didn't know how to enroll me in a school at first. So I remember many months I was we were just hanging and looking for places, resources, anything that she could find. And since I grew up in South Central, the education system, unfortunately, in low-income families or areas, it's very poor. It's very poorly. I remember my 8th grade, I had a substitute teacher throughout the year for the English subject, which it delayed me, and I had to work twice or even 3 times to gain that knowledge in comprehending the English language. I'm very native and I'm very strong in Spanish. However, that English never came because of the absences that I had in my education. But so in the 6th grade, that's when I can recall in saying, oh, I'm stable. I have a bus pass. I can move around. I know the city. I know my buses. I can grab this one and that one, and I can go to downtown LA. I can communicate better. And in terms of adapting to education, to an environment, to a community, that was another thing, because we were Salvadorian. So Salvadorans have an accent in our Spanish. So I had to learn English and Spanish because I didn't know what a cora is. Oh, give me the cora. Cora. Oh, it's a 25 cents coin. Oh, okay. Or quiquea la pelota. Quiquea what is that? Oh, patea la pelota. Okay, so I had to learn all that slang because, you know, we spoke not a different Spanish, but yeah, it was different words in Spanish. So we got bullied just with Binh. I'm like, oh my God. So I stopped talking. When I would see a group of children that they were Hispanic, I didn't speak. I didn't speak because I knew I was going to get picked. So I had to find a strategies to survive around in the community that I was growing in. And then after you adapt, you learn their slang, and you start speaking like them. And you can survive with that, and you stop being picked. But yeah, so it was I want to recall good 4 years in my life that, oh gosh, I hated it. I hate the winter too. I remember the first winter in Los Angeles, and I know other places are even worse. But my country, El Salvador, is a tropical country, so it's always warm and warm water and hot in the sun. So when the winter came, oh Lord Jesus Christ, I remember how cold it was, and I hated it because we didn't have good sweaters, we didn't have pants. I had a dress in the winter. It's not a good idea. So yeah, after I recall in the 6th grade, I that's when I feel, okay, this is my home. This is good.
Yeah.
I can survive. I learned how to be streetwise, and I learned how to read people, and I learned to be quiet when I need to be quiet, and I learned how to speak up when I need to speak up. So, you know, I wouldn't change that for anything.
Mhm.
Well, good thing you're not in Utah.
I'm serious.
Chicago.
I was walking to school in like knee deep of snow
Oh,
in boots. That's another thing, Daniel. That was talking about suffering. That was
right.
pretty bad. Come home, have to hang up my socks because it's all wet. My sponsor, they gave us the basement for 8 of us, and that's where we stayed for a year before we were able to get government support, subsidies, and housing. Was able to get out on our own. But yeah, that reminded me of when you talk about that, Claudia. I was like, no, I walked in snow. You were just in LA. You
I
shouldn't be
was just in
complaining.
LA in December, January, February,
Right.
March, and
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
remember because they used to bus us all the time,
Right.
and so sitting down in the plastic covers
Right.
of the bus, I remember I used to do one leg at a time, like
Of course.
every morning because we had to be the first ones in school to be
Yep.
bused to another school because that school where our housing currently was, it was full. So
Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah.
That's funny.
Jose Antonio, you must have had a similar experience when you got to Chicago, right?
Yes, I
Windy
did.
City.
Actually, it was very interesting because, one of the things I wanted to mention, when I was invited in that summer to visit Chicago by this relative of mine, and I went to the American embassy for a visa. I had to get my Mexican passport, and then I went to a visa. Something very interesting happened because the person who's interviewing me is asking me, what am I going to do? I say, oh, I want to go to see music, blah, blah, blah. I said, so you are a student. Would you like to study there? I say, I don't know. But he put in my passport in the last page, potential student in English. So then we crossing by land, see. But that was also an interesting experience because we drove from our hometown in the middle of the Mexico, it's close to Aguascalientes, to Laredo, crossing by, no problem. But I remember that at one point in Texarkana, we had to, we stopped in this diner to eat something. And here, I mean, my English is very minimum in terms of speaking, but because I had studied for some years, I was able to read some words. But what really struck me was the sign in this diner saying, Mexicans, dogs, and blacks will not be served. And I got very offended. It was my first experience of discrimination in this country in that sense. Got very offended. And I remember telling my cousins, I go to the booth, I say, look, did you read that? He says, you better shut up because now I'm talking English, I'm talking Spanish. You better be quiet. And they were, they're blue-eyed and blondie, very white. These cousins of mine says, you don't say anything because they're gonna kick us out. And I'll say, you know what, I'm leaving. Are you hungry? He said, I'm not going to give him a cent, because of that sign. I'd rather go hungry than paying for that. So yeah, we go, but this is summer, right? So I'm arriving in Chicago, and it's a great, the weather is great, although we went to a barrio, there was the Polish neighborhood at that time. It was around Ashland, Chicago, and Milwaukee, very bare. Now it's very gentrified, but then it was, working class, very working class, And of course, having the experience of meeting not just, some Mexicanos, but also there were Puerto Ricans, and it was this mixture of races, and as Claudia was saying, in terms of the words, one of the things I noticed was that the Spanish that somehow they were talking about was actually a transformation of the Spanish that we spoke in Mexico or even in the city, La marqueta, a parquear, marqueta for market, parquear for parking, for estacionarse. I'm like, wait, el mercado, marqueta, okay. So, things go by and it was, like I said, it was 2-week vacation, but also what happened to me, and I say, I'm not looking for anything, right? But then one of my cousins says, do you want to work? And I said, well, I don't have papers. He says, I never ask you for papers. I'm asking you when I work.
Hmm.
Well, what am I going to do? He says, well, we're going to work in this golf club, you know, for the high end, north of Northbrook is north of Evanston, you know, but high professional Jewish community in that specific club. We're just going to be by the pool. We're going to be serving hamburgers and, you know, the hot dogs and ice cream for the kids and the moms while the husbands are playing golf. So, okay, let's go. And I remember the first shocking thing for me was like, with these two American young men who became very good friends later on, you know, they are really in charge, and people are coming and asking things, and I'm like, I don't understand, right? I don't understand, and they're getting impatient with me. So at one point, it occurred to me to write down, and the guys are like, "You can write English?" And you know, I write it down and say yes. So they say, so they started actually, you know, saying hamburger, written this way, pronounced this way. So, you know, suddenly I'm getting into this situation of starting to get command of the language somehow. And then also having, you know, my first paycheck, and I'm like, wow, dollars. So I say, I can buy the guitar that I want. You know, I can buy the guitar if I stay for 6 months. So that job ends on the summer, Labor Day, it's over. But my cousins work in factories, and I said, can you give me another job? He said, sure, we'll get you another job to do that. And to make the story short, you know, I at one point say, well, okay, I'm gonna buy my guitar and maybe also get some other things, you know, some albums, some vinyl, because I'm a big collector of vinyl. And well, we going through this and having these factory jobs, you know, I remember that's when the winter comes in, and for the first time, I'm seeing the snow coming into Chicago. Beautiful, you know. Here I am standing in the parking area of this factory, looking at the snow falling up. And obviously, at the moment, you don't feel the cold. It's beautiful, you know. That happens later when I started freezing myself, and I had to buy these jackets and boots and stuff, you know. So I'm working in there, and also, you know, things happen. I got fired. I got into a discussion in my bad English with the owner of the factory, an Italian guy who he was telling me I was wasting time because I went to the restroom just after lunch, you know, and I'm like, and I responded back. I said, you know what? And like I said, with my very minimal English, I needed to go to the restroom. What is the problem, you know? I'm not wasting time. It's my body that is asking for this. To make the story short, I get fired and I end up in another factory. I got accused of being a communist because actually, it's true. When I was in Mexico, I went at the University of Mexico. It was a lot of the dialectic discussion and Marxism being, you know, taught somehow. So it was this thing about justice, equality, et cetera, you know. And so, you know, I'm working in here and I'm with my cousins, and then I end up with all these paisanos, people from my hometown who didn't speak really English. They really went there to make money. That was their goal. You know, buy some dollars, start building a house back in our home, in their hometown or our hometown in El Pueblo, you know, and then go away in November when it's the big fiestas in Teocaltiche, and then stay there until March and come back by the beginning of April again to start spending all this time making again the dollars, you know. But one of the things that I realized immediately was after having some really interesting situations, you know, I mean, it was really up and down, up to the point when even my own family kicked me out of the house because supposedly I was getting lost in the life of the United States, right? And when I go and live with these guys, suddenly I say, you know what? This is not working for me. I say that to myself. I have to move away. But then with my father was upset with me because I was supposed to study architecture. And I end up going to the School of Music, right? I'm the oldest. I'm supposed to be the sample. My parents didn't have a higher education, so they're really looking forward for me to set the sample to my brothers and sisters to get ahead, right? Through going to college and all this and that. And I'm ended up going to the music. So suddenly my father was very upset, but when I decided to stay I said, I'll stay for 6 months to buy the guitar. And at that time, you could not bring anything to Mexico. And he had connections because he worked for the Mexican government. Said, Father, I know this and that. I'm just writing you this letter as a friend and as your son. Will you help me bring my instrument? And he says, yes. And the next thing I know, he's sending me another letter saying, well, what about you staying there for a year instead of 6 months and studied English? Go and get, serious with English. And when you come back, you have the language as a backup. And then I'm thinking, okay, then I can buy the amplifier, I can buy this, I can buy that, right? And then another letter, a week or so later, is like, well, what about you going to school there? Have you thought about it? And I went, to by then, the little I knew, I was riding the bus and stuff. So I located the school, the Chicago Conservatory of Music, went and tried to be there. And interestingly enough, got all the paperwork I needed. By my visa, my tourist visa had expired. So it occurs to me to go to the immigration office to, fix the problem. So as soon as I arrived there and I show one of the officers my passport and he sees that, it's already, the visa has expired, he just took me into the deportation room immediately. And I'm like, I need to speak to a supervisor. And it's full of bunch of Mexicanos in reality, And every time they open the door, I want to talk to a supervisor. And they are just looking at me like I'm crazy, the officers. And these guys are really laughing at me. Yeah, sure, yeah, But then at one point, this young American who actually looked like Tom Selleck when he was doing Magnum PI, comes in with my passport and says, who is the one who wants to talk to a supervisor? And I'm like, this is me, and I'm trying to explain. He says, no, wait. So he takes me out. So I explain somehow in my very limited language, what I'm trying to do. And he gets upset. I think he was really a big shot up there, and he says, what's going on in here? I mean, that was a big lesson for me in that sense. He said, what is going on with him? You guys, who did this? Don't you understand? This young man is what this country needs. That's what we are made of. People who have a dream, and wants to go to school, he's trying to do things fine, and you're gonna kick him out? Forget it. So he really, chewing to them, and then I'm like, wow. So then he gives me my passport back, and he says, Jose Antonio, go and to school and follow your dream, but don't come back here until you're really enrolled in school, and that changed many, many things. And I had several adventures like that, But one of the things that became clear to me is, doesn't matter if I have papers or not, I have to learn the language. If you are in command of the language, you're going to be able to move and to accomplish things and do things, Somehow that's the key. And that's always what I have said to people, Here in Los Angeles, it's one of those situations where people can make a living practically without learning English at all, But maybe in Chicago is the same now. But to me, it was very important. Having the language is one thing. The thing that is going to help you to open certain doors, And at that moment, I'm really involved into being a musician. So, I eventually go to the American Conservatory of Music, but then I go into other stories, and maybe I should go back to you, Daniel, so you can follow this, because as you know, I have a lot of stories to say.
You have many stories to share, and they're fascinating too. So we're running out of time, but I did want to talk, first of all, with Binh. I'm not sure how automatic it was for you to become a citizen, or how tell me about that part of your Or-
Well, it was several things, you
No,
know.
I'm sorry. I was talking to Binh.
Lynn, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
Sure.
you're coming next. So, well, after
Claudia.
Claudia.
Yeah, it was, when we came over, we applied for a green card. So we held a green card for, I think, I didn't apply for citizenship until first year of college. So that was 1990 when I remember having to study, for it and all that. And was one of the goal was, every family member had to go through the process. And I remember being in a large auditorium, with the rest of others that were trying to get their citizenship, and went through the whole process. And remember just going through like lines and lines and getting to a station, taking the test. After that, you pass, and now you got to go to another section where they, you had to swear in and all that jazz. And so I remember that process vividly. And got the citizenship. It took a while, but we did it. And very proud moments within, when everyone got it. And definitely was set out as a goal. At that time, my brothers finally have graduated college, so that was a goal for everyone. And we took our marching orders from our parents. Like, they suffer for us to be able to get educated and become citizens, and make something of ourselves. And I think we exceeded their expectations for sure, as a family. And doing well today. And happy, to say that it was a dream come true for us. And we now send them back to their homeland every year, so that they can tell stories and listen to stories. Because my mom has 10 siblings still there, and my dad as well have siblings at other places. But it's payback time from the kids' perspective, right? To ensure they're comfortable, and they're traveling, and they're experiencing life right now. So anyway, that's where we're at.
That's one. Yeah, so a great feeling of accomplishment for
Yeah.
getting your citizenship, and you feel it opened doors. And
Absolutely. I think, that was the whole reason where, if you're a citizen, you can do anything, in America and in the States. And, in our mind, it was like you needed to get a job, right? My parents didn't believe in us working. They wanted to do the work. They wanted us to get the citizenship. They want us to get the education, and was telling us that you need this in order to be successful. It's like your license to life in America. So they kind of instill that in our upbringing, that's the goal. It's the license to live, and we gave up, what we had for this opportunity. And yeah, never give up, and we got to succeed at all costs. And yeah, we all, it's if your parents say it that way, you go out and you get it because it's your livelihood, right? And honestly, that was motivation, and they are absolutely right. All of us are, have our citizens, our kids are now born here. And it's because of that it changed our perspective, and it changes our course and our determination to make something of ourselves.
yeah, that's wonderful. Claudia, same question to you.
Yeah, well, mine wasn't that successful. I became residence until 2000.
Oh.
How did that happen? Well,
Wow.
we end up with a bad lawyer. So my family and I think it was either 87 or 88, correct me if I'm wrong, the amnesty came out. And that was the only way for us to start a process of legalizing ourselves here because we enter the country legal. We didn't have any sponsors. So we were just a family, an immigrant family. So we applied, everything was successful. We got the, if I don't know if you recall, but the process of the amnesty was that you get the first card, and then you get the second card, and then you become resident in the United States. Well, we never moved from the first. We never moved from the first. We submitted the proofs that they were asking, and for some reason we were pending from when we entered until we got the denial letter in 1985, because that's when my daughter was born. My first daughter was born, and months, maybe 2 to 3 months after I received that letter. We all, the whole family, we went to investigate, appeal, and it seemed like the paperwork was lost in translation. They never received the paperwork. The application was denied, and I was illegal again because for all those time you were considered legal. You consider yourself a resident because you have an application in process. So by that time I was already an adult, and I was already working, and I didn't say anything. So I continued working illegal in the country. I had a social security, I mean, it's not funny, but I had a social security card, and I continued working with my social security card. And so yeah, after when I married my husband, that's when I became a resident in the country. So it was a long journey. How did I feel when I became resident? Free. I had wings. I was very, very happy that finally I was able to vote. Finally, I had a name next to a green card. I waited, I kid you not, like a year, and I applied for citizenship. I'm like, no, I want to be a citizenship. I've been here for so many years, and I want to do that. And it was the most happiest time in my life.
That's a great story.
Yeah.
Jose, take us out. Tell us about.
Well, in my case, like I said, I had become illegally because of my visa having, not being renewed then. But I decided when, I had a moment when I discovered my real calling as a visual artist. When I was visiting by default the museum, the Art Institute of Chicago, and I was standing in front of the water lilies of Monet, and something happened. I had a catharsis, Suddenly the gods really touched my mind, my soul, and my heart, and decided that I was going to leave 3 or some years of studying music to start all over again as a visual artist, But for then I had to pay my way. I was always working, From the factories, I went into working at restaurants, I mean, that was good money there, right? To be able to pay tuition and my living and stuff. And then it happened something happened very interesting, because I was going through this, just paying for certain classes. I couldn't be a full-time student, So I was just paying for, I was called a student at large. So in a way, I was paying for classes that will give me the credit to enroll into the BFA program eventually. But then it was a fight, a championship fight, a boxing fight between Pipino Cuevas and Randy Shields in Chicago. And my father also worked for the boxing commission in Mexico City. So what happened, he called me, he says, so-and-so friend of mine is going to be judging the fight. I want you to connect with him so you can help him to take him to stores, buy a few things, whatever, right? So I go and pick up Marco Antonio, the judge of the fight, the Mexican representative, and he comes out from his hotel and he says, you know what? I just went to get some coffee, and the one who was there was Don Luis Espota. Luis Espota was one of the most amazing writers, journalists in Mexico, you know. So then he's telling him, stay here to have some breakfast. He says, no, because I'm going to see El Hijo de Chucho Aguirre. My father was called Chucho. His name is Jesus. And anyway, so he says, really, I had to meet him. To make the story short, you know, when Don Luis meets me and, you know, realizes I had already painted my first mural in Pilsen in Chicago, saw it and all this and all that. He says, how you're doing this? You're coming to, this is the #1 school in the United States and one of the top in the world. Your father doesn't have this kind of money. I say, no, I know my father doesn't have that kind of money. I'm paying for myself. You know, I'm doing all this, I'm doing all that. And by then I was working in a newspaper called La Raza, a Spanish newspaper in Chicago. So, you know, he says to me after the fight, I'm taking him to the airport, and he says, listen, Jose Antonio, would you go back to school? I said, well, that's what I'm aiming for. Actually, I didn't went for a semester because I'm saving the money. He says, well, listen, maybe I'm good friends with the director of Bellas Artes. Let's see if we can get you a scholarship to go to study. I say, okay, great. You know, a few months have passed by, and I say, well, he was one of the top journalists, novelist writers, plus with a TV program, and I'm listening to anything. Although my father will see him and he will ask him, well, how's our artist doing? And I said, well, you know, you say hi to him. And then eventually I get this letter from Mexico saying that I was granted a scholarship to go anywhere in the world where I wanted to study art. And I had to go back to Mexico. So there I go back to Mexico. And when I'm trying to get back into the country, I had to renew my passport and all this and that. So at the embassy, they discovered that I had been illegally in the country. So I had to go for 6 days, practically from Monday through Friday, to fight for my way to let me in again, you know. And that's a long story, but I ended up getting back to the United States to do my BFA with this not really full scholarship for tuition, but I still had to work. So what I did, instead of working in the school, I went to the owner of the newspaper, the Señor Dovalina, Cesar Dovalina, and I told him, because I had resigned my job, right? And I said, well, you know, I need a job. I still need a job because I will not be able to pay for my living expenses. And he says, okay, you can have your job back. So I go through all that, and then other things happen. The Mexican situation in 1982 about you know, we were supposed to be millionaires because they had found oil in all the Gulf of Mexico and this and that. And it was a lot of corruption. To make the story short, you know, suddenly all the scholarships are canceled, and I just have 1 semester to go to school. And I'm like, I need to finish. Luckily, the authorities in the school, the board, accepted for me to finish, with the only condition was that I will not get my diploma or transcript until I paid that money. And my dream then was to go to Europe, continue with my master's. I wanted to go to Paris, you know, the classical thing. And Luis Espota said to me, you have to do whatever you need to do, get those documents, and now we'll be able to arrange for another scholarship for you to go to Europe. Many things happened, and one of them was he passed away, and then it was the Mexican earthquake. So I'm finding myself that I have to stay in the United States illegally, right? Because I need to get those documents first. So I kept on working, did that, and but at that point, you know, I decided, when I finally got my transcripts and my diploma, I was doing painting a mural for the University of Chicago. And at that point, I said, I don't want to live in Chicago anymore. I'm tired of the cold. And one of my professors, Robert Lesher, said to me, Jose Antonio, if you're not going to go to Europe, and if you cannot go back to Mexico because of the earthquake, it was really a very bad situation. He says, Why you don't go? You have to go and live closer to the border, closer to Mexico. So I ended up applying to schools in several schools around the country, but I got accepted at CalArts and decided to live in Austin for a little bit first. You know, I was roommating with Sandra Cisneros, the Chicana poet, in a scholarship that she got from the University of Texas, you know, residency. And from there, I come to Los Angeles, and I'm still, you know, trying to deal with that. By then, I'm not having a scholarship. I still have to work. I go and work for La Opinión newspaper to pay my way, you know, to start doing, again, doing some classes, buying some classes to be able to enroll in the master program. And to make the story short, I accomplished that. And then talking about like Claudia, then we get the amnesty. And through the amnesty, I was working with this Argentinian representative of the arts, you know, actually had a gallery in Melrose on the west side. And he had a very good lawyer. He says, you know what, let's give him your papers. And I tried to make it happen for my green card that way, you know, meaning that somehow I had all these records as being a cultural, how you say, asset to the United States. We, you know, had a lot of activities, and he says, you know, we're going to work it this way. Got my green card, and for a few years I stayed like that. And I decided to become a citizen because by then Mexico had accepted dual citizenship. You know, and one of the things that I had noticed is that I was missing certain opportunities, you know, and to get the citizenship was going to open doors. Like, for example, for me to get a Fulbright award to work in that vein, you know, from the city of Los Angeles, it put me into a different level, you know. And when I got it, I was very happy because I had friends who had all the documentation, you know, Mexicans who were citizens, they had green cards, they had all these scholarships, and they wasted the opportunities, you know. So I was hungry for that. And in a sense, the same thing I wanted to do, you know, I wanted to see how I was going to become a bridge as an artist and as an activist between Mexico and the United States. So yes, it was a moment of joy to become an American citizen, you know, to get naturalized. But again, you know, it was a question of being stubborn in following a dream in reality. It was just a following a dream, you know. It was not an economical dream. I mean, to me, it was how am I going to realize myself as a human being through being a creative individual, and how I can project that into the other generations. And actually, it's part of my goal right now, or the things that I do, is that the younger generations to learn this, and also for the migrants to start realizing that the opportunities are here to make things happen the way you want to make them happen. It's not impossible.
Okay. Well, I really have so much more to ask, but we are so out of time right now. I really want to thank all of you guys. Very unique stories, and your passion comes through, and your success, I'm sure, is an inspiration to people listening. It's certainly an inspiration to me. So I just want to thank you all for joining us. And maybe we'll do it. You know, we've really sort of got to get into part 2 about how life happened afterwards and what went on. You guys are all very successful in your unique ways, and I'm sorry we didn't get to that. But again, thank you all for being here. I just we have to go. So I just wanted to quickly I want to thank everybody. And I wanted to mention that LA County Library offers a citizenship webpage with resources and information for anyone involved in seeking citizenship help. We're currently having a fun citizenship reading challenge, which runs through the end of the month. Look for information on our website at lacountylibrary.org/citizenship. And you can also visit our local libraries, and they can help you as well. So also visit our site, our LA County Library site, for more programming and activities. And I have to say Happy Independence Day to Mexico.
Thank you.
Yesterday was Mexico's Independence Day. And, it's Hispanic Heritage Month, and there are quite a few Latin American countries that are having their Independence Days around now. So congratulations to all of them. Thank you all very much for being here. And thank you in the audience for listening. And, thank you.
Well,
Have a
thank
good night.
you very much. And it was very nice to meet you, Claudia, Binh. Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks for sharing.
Same here. Thank you,
Same here.
everyone.
Thanks,
Alrighty.
everyone. Thanks, Daniel,
Okay.
for hosting.
Oh, this has been my pleasure. Thank you so much.